Hey, party people. Welcome back to another broadcast of In the Trenches, a weekly show where I sit down with the world's most interesting entrepreneurs, writers, artists, and leaders to get inside their heads and hearts to extract practical wisdom you can apply to your own entrepreneurial and creative pursuits. Yeah, that's a mouthful, but that's why we're here today. Listener JJ Mitchell 94 says, In the Trenches is a great shot in the arm on my way to work in the morning. He's an excellent moderator. I hate to miss it. And that is a 5-star iTunes review. Thanks, JJ. You have great taste and you're spot on. Today's show is going to be a shot in the arm for those of you who want to improve your focus, increase your energy, and find more joy in the work you do on a day-to-day basis. I'm excited to introduce John Jantsch. John is the founder, creator of Duct Tape Marketing, the consultancy and book by the same name. He's also the author of the Referral Engine, Duct Tape Selling, the Commitment Engine, and SEO for Growth. His newest work, The Self-reliant Entrepreneur, 366 daily meditations to feed your soul and grow your business, taps into the wisdom of 19th century transcendentalist literature and the author's own 30-year entrepreneurial journey to challenge today's entrepreneurs to remain fiercely self-reliant while chasing their own version of success. And my big takeaway from today's call, there are two major challenges that every entrepreneur will run into, two major roadblocks. The first is distraction, losing time, not making useful gains because you're getting sidetracked. It's the result of a lack of focus, if you will. But ultimately, distraction is really crippling because there's only so many days in a row that you cannot make progress before you have to throw in the towel for anything you're doing. So remember that. Distraction will keep you from making those daily gains. And the second thing that John shares is like one of the biggest challenges or failure points for entrepreneurs and creatives is comparison. And that's getting caught up in what other people are doing. So the reason comparison is so deadly is because at best, it's a distraction. So we're still left with that number one problem that maybe most entrepreneurs, most creatives face. But at worst, it can compromise your goals because you begin to mimic someone else's outside and you have no idea what's under the hood. I think that's the most dangerous aspect of it. Not even just, I'm not doing as well as this person, or I wish I was happy as these people look in this photo. Although there's that too, and that could be self-defeating. But I think from a business standpoint, be very wary of mimicking somebody's outside and trying to replicate somebody else's business model when all you've seen is the hood, or maybe a quick peek under the hood. The way you learn to build an engine is not by looking at a bunch of hoods or popping the hoods and looking at a bunch of engines. You learn how to build an engine by building an engine. And that's your engine for your business, your art, your writing. That's what you have to focus on. Build the engine. Look at the principles, look at the foundational stuff you need, implement it, and do that every day and go forward. Don't worry about somebody else's outside. Don't get it caught in the comparison game. All right, so that's just like one of the interesting insights of many from my conversation today with John Jantsch. So I think you guys are really going to like today's call. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I hope you guys enjoy. So John, let's kick things off. Before we get into the Self-reliant Entrepreneur and what you're kind of doing in this publishing space, what this book is about, and how it can be used, let's go back in time. And I know there's going to be a lot of ground to cover, but how did you get into marketing in the first place? Because a lot of people know you as, the duct tape marketer, right? So give us a little bit of your backstory there.
Yeah, so I'm going to start in second grade. No, not actually. A little farther than that. I got out of college and went to work for an ad agency. And about 5 years into that, I realized I really wanted to work for myself. I wanted to do my own thing. So like a lot of people, I jumped out with no plan. I knew I could hustle some work. And so that was kind of my foray into the marketing consulting world. And that was just almost 3 decades ago that I did that. After I did it for a few years, I realized that, I took whatever work I could get, any type of client I could get, any kind of project. And I started kind of gravitating towards small business owners. I just found them a lot more fun and rewarding to work with, but they were also very challenging. They had the same needs and challenges as much larger businesses, but certainly not the same budgets or even attention spans. So at some point, I decided I needed to create this very systematic way to work with small business if I was going to, where I could walk in and say, here's what I'm going to do, here's what you're going to do, here are the results we hope we get, and here's what it costs. And that was actually the genesis of the duct tape marketing system. Felt like I had to give it kind of more of a name, a producty, brandy name. So I came up with the name Duct Tape Marketing. And what I found out was, in trying to solve my frustration, I tapped into what is still today one of the greatest frustrations with a lot of small businesses. It's really hard to buy marketing services. Everybody's selling a piece of the puzzle, and the puzzle's gotten a lot more complex, over the last couple decades. And so this idea of installing a marketing system with a set price was really very appealing. I started writing about that, really kind of when blogging and podcasting and things first started in 2003, 2004. Started attracting a lot of folks and attention, online with this approach, and maybe to some degree with this name, Duct Tape Marketing, and that turned into then my first book, which is called Duct Tape Marketing, and then I just named everything: my blog, my podcast, pretty much everything Duct Tape Marketing, and I actually even expanded. I didn't really want to grow my own organization to have consultants, but I knew I wanted to work with more business owners, so. I expanded by licensing the Duct Tape Marketing system to now about 150 small agencies and consultants around the world that form the Duct Tape Marketing Consultant Network. And so, now we work with thousands of small business owners installing the Duct Tape Marketing system.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's interesting too. Your move from kind of more purely focused on the marketing side of things to what you're doing now with the Self-reliant Entrepreneur, and kind of going, I think, more from what it seems like to me, the specific marketing side of things to kind of the holistic entrepreneur or business owner side of things a little bit. Is that a shift that was intentional?
Yeah, no question. I mean, this is my sixth book. My 5 other books have been squarely about how to do some aspect of marketing. But I also think that I think being an entrepreneurship is probably the greatest personal development program ever created, and so I've been on a journey myself. I just think we as entrepreneurs, if we're not working on ourselves, we're not growing, we're not stretching ourselves and kind of chasing after things that really interest us. We're going to get run over, and so I wanted to write a book that really addressed more of the mindset. I think there's so much content out there, so many books out there, so much how to do stuff that we really, there is no lack of that. But I think there is a little bit of a lack, especially in the entrepreneur space. I mean, I don't think there's another book exactly like this that is meant to just be kind of a mindset, why to do what we're doing, that kind of acts as a daily practice, as opposed to just, read this book and you've got it down and, over a weekend or over vacation, and now you can go back to work. This is almost like a workbook. It is set up as every single day of the calendar, you get a new page with a new thought and a question even to try to challenge you that day. So I wanted to fit into that kind of morning routine space, which is a practice that I know a lot of entrepreneurs have. I personally have to kind of get your day started right. Because there's a lot of things that are going to try to trip you up throughout the day, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs kind of take that morning time to really get themselves centered. And so, I wanted to write something that fit into that space.
Well, to comment on the idea of there's a lot of information, there's a lot of how-tos out there, but less on this other side, like the why. And I think that's something I'm noticing too. And I think that's maybe a natural progression of kind of where things are at, with the e-course boom and podcasts and blogs. And there's just so much free content and then paid content, great stuff for cheaper and cheaper. So it's like people aren't really struggling to find what to do. But, I'll give it a boxing analogy. It's like to be a really good boxer, you do have to have a trainer. You have to have somebody to do mitts with you, and it's like, but it's like, and maybe that's a person, but in this context, I think there's also tools we can use. And it seems like, a daily journal or something like that, some kind of tool like this would be more on the mitt side of the training, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think you have seen a lot of, some, journals are probably the biggest selling category, online for entrepreneurs, I think. And it's because I think a lot of entrepreneurs really see a lot of value in, thinking about what they stand for, thinking about, their kind of values that they're going to bring into every day, thinking about, how they stay true to what they want to do. I mean, the title of this book, The Self-reliant Entrepreneur, borrows from Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay titled Self-reliance. And it was really, in fact, the entire book is really based on a great deal of this mid-19th century writing. I happen to think that was a period of some of the best writing for entrepreneurs, even though they weren't writing for entrepreneurs. It was a period when the literature, we think about what we were doing in America at the time, in about 1850, we were on the cusp of the Civil War. Women were marching in the streets to get the right to vote. We were trying to abolish slavery. It was the first countercultural period in America. And a lot of the literature of the time was about, hey, you've got to think for yourself. You've got to follow your own heart. You don't have to listen to the preacher or your parents or the politicians or the people that tell you need to follow a certain path. You need to think for yourself and live for yourself. And it was the first time you really saw that kind of writing in American literature. And it even crept over into the fiction. Moby Dick and Scarlet Letter and Little Women. I mean, those were all protagonists that were, very much realized that it was going to cost them to follow their heart, but they needed to do that. And I just happen to think that's some of the greatest advice for entrepreneurs. This literature has stood the test of time to where I think it really offers some great wisdom. And all I've tried to do is contextualize it for maybe today's entrepreneur.
When you were putting something like this together, I'm curious, how do you decide how you're going to organize your thoughts? I'm kind of how you approach this, because you said you had a morning routine. And so I'm kind of curious what you just adopted from your own personal success habits or principles or systems.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I do happen to do and have done for years is I do meditate, and I like to read something that I think is very inspirational. Maybe it'll be something that really touches on something I'm working on, but it would be a short reading. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, the format of this book was kind of for myself, if you will, because it's the type of reading and type of approach I like to take. So it a lot of ways, like I said, I think a lot of people do that. You write the book that you wish existed, I guess, and hopefully it brings brings some value to other people as well.
What do you think? What do you recommend for people who are I guess is there a particular level where you think this type of book is most appropriate for the person just getting started, or more for the person who's kind of maybe more established, kind of knows the direction they're going? And how would you apply this practically?
Well, I've actually talked to a lot of folks that are kind of, as I've been writing this book, as I've gone out and done workshops and things, I'm meeting people of all ages, and it is interesting. A lot of times when people are just getting started, they feel like, yeah, I need this. I need somebody to tell me it's going to be okay,
Right.
And this book certainly offers a little bit of that. And also, a lot of this book is about learning to trust yourself and learning to say, okay, I can ignore other people, or I can change my mind. I mean, those are all things that come, I think, by when you develop a level of self-trust. But then I've also found folks that, like myself, that have been doing this for a while, that this book in some ways offers insight into meaning, is what I've been doing for all this time making a difference? Whose life has been bettered because, I've taken this path. And I think a lot of people quite naturally, as they are in their venture for a lot of times, I think we all kind of generally come to that point of trying to, understand, intentionally the value that I'm bringing to the world, not just, to feed my family, but to make other people's lives better. And so I think that's just natural in terms of, your experience level. But I think this book in a lot of ways offers something for really, kind of both levels.
What do you see, and with your experience on the, duct tape marketing side of things, and for the many years that you've been doing this, and now most recently, kind of making this more timely as well. There's I believe there are foundational success principles. There's foundational kind of pillar stuff you need to do as an entrepreneur or creator. But there's also, I think, mistakes that are common maybe to the era or to the time period. I'm wondering if in the last 6 to 12 months, or even if you extrapolate further and you've seen it still, it's more consistent than that, the common challenges or errors or problems that entrepreneurs typically face, and why you think this is the place to start to solve those.
Well, I think there are probably hundreds, but I think the two that are so connected are distraction and comparison. It's so easy to get distracted and spend all your day, fuddling around with your email and responding to people on, Facebook. And then you look up at the end of the day and you haven't really worked on anything that was a priority or, anything that's going to move the needle. And sometimes that's because that's hard work, or because that you're afraid, to put that thing out there in the world. And these distractions, make it seem like you're doing work. The other one is comparison. And again, hate to keep picking on social media, but it's really easy to see other people talking about their incredible life, their incredible business, their incredible children, and get very, very kind of caught up in the fact that most entrepreneurs feel like they haven't done enough. They haven't reached the goal they were trying to reach. And so when you throw that kind of comparison, whether it's accurate or not, into the mix, I think it can weigh on you and start kind of really crank up that voice inside your head, telling you, what's the point of all of this? So I think the most successful entrepreneurs that I've encountered over the years, don't suffer from those two things, or they find a way to shut them out and live more in the present. And I think that's a big theme that runs through this book. There's 6 or 7 themes that I touch on a lot, and mindfulness, and letting go of control, trying to control the things that you have no control over, like what happened in the past or what might happen in the future, what somebody says, how they respond to, you don't have any control over those things. The only thing you have control over is how you show up, and how you respond to everything that happens in the present moment. So practicing mindfulness is a big, big theme in this book.
On those 2 points, I think it's interesting because it's like, I agree. Like, I think that's becoming more and more true in my life too. The need to focus on the present, but with a caveat, or maybe an asterisk next to that, which is like, as long as like the direction, the focus, the aim is on point, because then you can do a full day's work, look up, okay, yep, I'm still heading in the right direction, and then move on. And you don't spend a lot of time mapping things out. It's like, no, we got the map, broadly speaking. Now we're going to do one day at a time, and we're going to traverse that path. And that's the journey we're on. It's really hard. I've realized, like, I think a lot of that comes through age, maybe, and wisdom, and just trial and error and getting used to it, because it's kind of an uncomfortable place to be unless you have a lot of confidence, hope, and like positive expectation of where you're going. So I'm kind of curious on this front too. What's your thoughts on goals and like setting your aim?
Yeah, I think they're a tricky subject, because I don't think there's anything wrong with having goals and objectives, but I think where they run people off course is when they get very attached to, here's exactly how I get there.
Yeah.
Because what happens then is we get really disappointed when something doesn't go the way we thought it was going to go, or we try to force, some solution, even though it's not there. And I think that people that stay very, very detached from how, they have like the goal, but they stay somewhat detached from, how it happens, are actually able to recognize opportunities and to kind of reframe when something doesn't work as, maybe a positive thing. I know, from the value of hindsight, how many times something didn't happen, but a better result became because of it. After a while, you start seeing that luck, show up, and it makes you start kind of relaxing about, and letting go of, trying to control how things are going to happen. Now, the slippery slope part of that is a lot of goal setters will say, well, if you detach completely from how you're going to get there, and how you're going to get there is hard work, then how do you ever expect to meet your goals? And I just one of the challenges with that mindset is, how many people do you just see that are set on a goal and set on exactly how they're going to get there, and they've got their nose to the grindstone, and they've just sucked all the joy out of the entire ride.
Yeah. Well, have you ever heard of or seen the movie Free Solo? I think it was.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Just recently came across that. I'd heard a bunch about it. Finally watched it. Thought it was pretty interesting. But it makes me think. Like, I think a mountain's also a great metaphor.
Sure.
And it's like, well, the goal is to climb to the top of this mountain. That's the goal. It's. I think that's important. But as far as like the execution of that, just like in that movie, he had to kind of shift his dates and times just based on how he was feeling. And that was just the nuance of that, because it was like there was life and death in that situation. Obviously, our stakes aren't so high in the world of like entrepreneurship and writing and creativity and art. But the thought of this is the goal. This is the broad goal. This is where I'm going. But then saying, well, now what's the next thing I have to do? What now? What next? Actually, something that Seth Godin, I remember reading from him in a blog post actually, but surprisingly just relevant. It was like, what now? What next? It's like these simple questions. If you know what that goal is, then you can figure out the best path to get there. Whereas I think what you're describing to me, it sounds like a lot of people get sucked into this trap where they use goal setting and it becomes the preoccupation. It becomes that distraction for them instead of being more simple. And then they try to make everything super detailed in their goals and their achievements and their charting of progression. And I think that can be just as disastrous as like no aim and no goal at all.
Yeah, and I mean, you see these Pinterest boards of that talk about hustle and grind and never ever ever give up and those kinds of things. And I think that doesn't sound like a very joyful ride to me.
No, and I actually am a big proponent of, like, I have a workhorse mentality or the pack mule mentality. I actually kind of just deep in my bones, I kind of get it. That's how I view life, and it's good for me. But I enjoy that the burden, the heavy lift of the burden. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it is interesting. And I think I like how you pointed out it was two things. And so it sounds like it's like if you can, and the positive flip side of those where people typically make those mistakes, it's focus.
Yep.
And then let's see, it's focus and it's daily practice, daily consistency.
Yeah, and again, I'm not the first person to talk about mindfulness, but that's something that actually, we have developed the habit of mindlessness, and so developing the habit of mindfulness and even tricking yourself into, I do little goofy things like 3 times a day I'll stop and close my eyes and take 5 deep breaths. I mean, it takes no time at all, but it just brings me back to nothing else matters but right now, and I think that. Little practices like that, I think help you have better meetings and things. We're all guilty of, especially in this technology now where we can do these meetings like this, where we're not really sitting in a room with people. I mean, you see people doing this and you hear the keyboard clicking and all this other stuff. And it's like, we're not giving our full or our all in anything. And I think multitasking is a complete myth.
It is.
You basically just don't serve either task that you're working on. So, just finding ways to make sure that you're fully present, just makes everything less stressful, I think.
Yeah. Do you have any, and I know that's not like the angle you're going with this, obviously, but I think it is a supportive element. What else? Like you give the idea of like just every now and then, like the idea of taking a deep breath. Are there any other, hacks or tricks or anything like that you personally incorporate that kind of helps you stay focused or, keep your eye on the ball or,
Sure.
Get to work, do the work well and do it every day?
Well, there's a couple things that I've done for years. And it's a planning practice that I typically do on Sunday evenings. I plan my week, what are my big things I need to accomplish this week? So that, and I schedule them. I mean, the main thing is if you don't do that, it'll get gobbled up with sometimes valuable, sometimes not so valuable activities and appointments. So that's number one. I mean, I really make sure that I have that time. And then for years, I have taken Tuesday and Thursday, and I call them focus days. And so, a lot of times on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm doing task oriented stuff, checklisty kind of stuff. And on Tuesday and Thursday, I might record a bunch of videos, or I might write something. I might, plan kind of a new project out, the kind of stuff where you probably benefit from some runway to kind of get going. I don't know about you, but sometimes if I have something that's going to take me a couple hours to write or something, it takes me 30 minutes of fussing to get myself into it. And so, sometimes you if you don't plan for that kind of stuff, you'll never get the time to do it.
So it sounds like a couple things that I think you can implement, or some people should try out for themselves to see if they like it. And I kind of try to do that. And I find when I do that, my week seems to be more on point, but it's like kind of planning or chunking out the week of work in front of you before it begins. And then I think and are you big on a calendar? I know that's like a really specific question, but what are your opinions on that?
I use a calendar, but I in some ways I probably use it a little differently than some people in that anything I want to get done goes on the calendar. So not just my appointments, but
exactly.
No, I need this block to create X, Y, and Z. That becomes an appointment. I'll tell you another thing that, and I don't know if you know Brant Menswar, but he's a speaker, and I had him on my podcast, and he had a really great point. So his whole thing is about staying true to your values. So identify your values, bring them into every day, to your work. And so he has like 5 core values, and he actually puts them on his meetings. And I thought that was really interesting. So like if one of your core values is listening, or, curiosity, or hope, or, all the things like that you actually then enter a meeting, making sure that you are focused on hope and that or trust, and in that meeting. And, I think, that's, we all talk about these core values and, how do you bring them in? But boy, schedule down to the point of scheduling your meeting with, making sure that you focus on that, I think is a brilliant way to, to make sure that you're living your values, because it's really easy to get knocked off course, throughout the course of a day, just, all the things that go on. I know by 2:00, I'm, mentally zapped, a lot of days. And so I thought that was brilliant.
I love that. Like two big things to me that stand out just to highlight. You mentioned how you use the calendar. I use that exactly the same way. And what I found is the visual, like using something like Google Calendar, seeing the week visualized and chunked by like half an hour to an hour tasks and stuff like that. You realize how little time you have, and how much you have to actually just be ruthless with your time. Like that's why I think that's such a good task for somebody to just try to do at least once. Just actually like map out your work day in hours or periods of time when you're working on something, and then try to do that for a week. It'd be kind of interesting. I find for me, it's a perpetual learning experience, but I always overestimate what I can do in like a given day or week typically. So I'm trying to get better at that, but I found that that's a good forcing function. The idea of now embedding the values, what you care about, what your values are, your business core values, your personal core values into those sessions. I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
I love that.
It's just a visual reminder. If you're using that tool, and we're all in that tool every day, it's just a great way to get yourself snapped back. Hey, one thing we talked about before we started recording was we've been talking about this book and sort of the format of it and whatnot. What if I read a page as
let's do it.
Kind of give people a real taste of what the book, how the book sets out. So as I said, it's every day. So we're recording this on December 6th. I don't know when people will end up listening to it, but I'll just read December 6th just to pick one. Every day starts with a title and then a reading. Today's happens to actually come from Thoreau. And then anywhere from 100 to 200 words from me trying to contextualize it. And then I leave you every day with a question that hopefully is the thing that kind of lingers the most, especially if the question seems a little hard to answer in that particular moment. So December 6th, something wonderful. This curious world which we inhabit is more wonderful than it is convenient, more beautiful than it is useful. It is more to be admired and enjoyed than used. We rejoice in it as one more indication of the entire and universal freedom that characterizes the age in which we live, or as an indication that the human race is making one more advance in that infinite series of progressions which awaits it. That's from Henry David Thoreau, and it's actually a letter that he wrote to Nathaniel Hawthorne in 1865. Let's face it, this curious entrepreneur thing is sometimes more wonderful than convenient, and at other times more beautiful than it is useful. But it is certainly one more indication of the entire and universal freedom that characterizes the age in which we live. To think any other way is to abuse this freedom. It's not our right. It's our honor to get to do this. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. It's a pain. It's a chore. It's like doing burpees. Well, maybe not quite like that, but you get it. Once the effort is put in, only something wonderful can come from it. Make peace with the hard And let's never take the present for granted. Your challenge question for this day is, what is the most wonderful thing you get to experience and the most inconvenient?
I love it. How long do you typically recommend people take to kind of, reflect or answer these kind of things?
Well, I don't think there is any formula for it. I mean, it takes no time at all, as you just experienced, to read it. But I do think it probably makes some sense to spend some time with that. There actually are a couple lines under each question in the book, and I know because people have sent me pictures that people are writing and highlighting and doing that kind of thing. So that might be the place that you want to write it. And one of the reasons I say that is because this is one of those books that you can read for years. Because I guarantee you, when you come back a year from now and read that day's selection, you're going to be a different person, and it's probably going to hit you differently. And wouldn't it be kind of fun to see what you wrote last year?
Yeah, I have the digital copy in front of me, and it's been, that's what I was reading along. It's been fun to go through it, but I'm actually excited to get the physical copy. I think this is something you kind of have to have in your hands. Sit down. I personally,
yeah, I think.
You could, the digital's still good. I'm not.
Yeah, I think it's an analog. No, I think it's an analog product. I totally agree.
I love the idea of that, and it just seems like I like the idea too because it's based on the dates that I could come back to it a year from now. Again, just even writing in a different space on the page to see what the questions or the thoughts elicit now to see like progress over time.
Yeah, and I more than one person has suggested that the follow-up is the journal, of course, to go with it too. So that may or may not happen. It depends on what my publisher thinks.
I like that this is low pressure, though. I'm just going to be real.
Yeah,
there's a lot. Journals kind of intimidate me.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like, this is like, I can for sure see myself reading a page and answering a question in like 1 or 2 lines. It's very low pressure, but it seems like a really good forcing function.
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. So no, I like the idea of go to the journal next, but this is a good place to start.
Yep.
Well, John, I just want to say this was a lot of fun kind of diving into your mindset and how you do what you do. I've always really admired your work. And so it's been really fun to have you on In the Trenches.
Well, thanks so much.
Before I let you go, I wanted to see, is there any place where people can go to find out more about you, check this out, or grab your book?
Yeah, so the book's available anywhere that you buy books. I always like to put in a plug for that local corner bookstore. Hopefully you have one of those in your town still. But you can, of course, order it from any of the online retailers as well. If you want to find out more about the book, listen to other interviews like this. You can find those at self-reliant-entrepreneur.com. And then if you are really curious about what I've been up to for the last couple of decades, you can find that at Duct Tape Marketing.com. And that's DUCTTAPE marketing.com.
Closing thoughts for 2020, the start of 2020.
Well, for me, that's all I can really share, I suppose. But I would encourage others to do this. Push yourself outside of your comfort zone, your limits. Experience new things. I think, to me, one of the things that I've developed over the years as a practice is I read books that are not business books specifically for business ideas, but books about architecture or calculus or something. Mm-hmm. It's amazing if you read them in that context of trying to learn something new that you can apply to your business. I just, for whatever reason, I always find nuggets. So that's not just reading. I mean, push yourself to go to places that you're not familiar with, or maybe you're uncomfortable with. Go eat weird food. I mean, I just think that's one of the best ways to grow is to make sure that you're experimenting.
I love it, and the perfect message to end on. John, thank you so much for being on In the Trenches. It was a real pleasure.
Yeah, my pleasure, Tom.
And that wraps up another broadcast of In the Trenches. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a rating review. Just go to tommorkes.com/iTunes, and that'll take you to iTunes where you can leave a 5-star rating review. And that really helps spread the word about this podcast. And finally, if you need help growing your online business or generating new traffic, leads, and sales at a profit, reach out to me at tom@tommorkes.com or head over to the website tommorkes.com and sign up for the free newsletter.